All right. I want you to do something for me right now before you even settle into your chair. Say this sentence out loud. At normal speed, the way a native speaker would toss it into a conversation without thinking twice. I couldn't quite make out what she said. It all just blurred together. If that sentence felt smooth, if it rolled off your tongue without you stumbling over a single word, then congratulations, you might already be ahead of where you think you are. But if it felt clunky, if your mouth wanted to slow down and separate each word like you were reading a children's book, then you are exactly who this video is for. And by the end of the next few minutes, together, you are going to own 35 to 40 words and expressions that most English learners never touch. Words that will let you talk about the exact experience of losing control when English speeds up. And more importantly, words that will help you take that control back. Not someday, not after another year of textbooks. Today, welcome to Natural Word English, the channel where we don't just hand you a list of fancy words and wish you luck. I'm Ava, and every single video here is built around one belief. Vocabulary only sticks when it lives inside a real moment, a real feeling, a real conversation you can actually picture yourself in. So today, we're not going to talk about grammar rules. We're not going to drill verb tenses. We're going to talk about something every intermediate English learner knows in their bones, but rarely has the words to describe. Nada. That specific disorienting feeling when a native speaker starts talking at full speed and your brain, which was doing just fine a second ago, suddenly feels like it's trying to catch a train that already left the platform. Here's why this matters so much, and I promise this will take less than 90 seconds. Most learners think the problem with fast English is speed. It's not. The real problem is that you're translating word by word inside your head while native speakers are speaking in chunks, in blended sounds, in whole units of meaning that arrive faster than your internal translator can process them. So the actual solution isn't listen more in some vague, hopeful way. The solution is building a specific vocabulary that lets you name what's happening to you, describe it precisely, and respond to it with composure instead of panic. When you have the word garbled, instead of just thinking, I didn't understand, your brain processes the experience differently. It categorizes it. It stops feeling like a personal failure and starts feeling like a technical, nameable problem you can solve. That's the whole philosophy behind today's video. We're going to build your vocabulary and your listening reflexes at the exact same time, in the exact same sentences, so that one reinforces the other. Ready? Let's get into it. Picture this. You walk into a small, sunlit cafe near your office, the kind with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu, and you're meeting a colleague from the London branch for the first time in person. She's mid-conversation with the barista when you walk in, laughing about something, and her words are flying by in that easy, rapid London rhythm. You catch her eye. She waves you over, and before you've even sat down, she says, "Sorry, I know I talk a mile a minute. Half the time, even my own team can't decipher what I'm saying first thing in the morning." Now stop right there. Decipher. This is our first word, and it's a beautiful one. To decipher something means to work out the meaning of something that is unclear, confusing, or written or spoken in a way that's hard to understand at first, like decoding a message. The basic word it upgrades is simply understand, but decipher carries this extra flavor of effort, of active mental work, like you're cracking a code. Notice how naturally it fit into her sentence. Half the time, even my own team can't decipher what I'm saying. She's not saying they don't understand English. She's saying her speech itself is like a puzzle they have to solve. Let's put it in another context so it really sticks. Imagine you're reading a doctor's handwriting on a prescription. You might say, "I could barely decipher what the doctor had written. The handwriting was so messy." Or picture a friend texting you in a rush, dropping half the vowels, and you respond, "Give me a second. I'm trying to decipher your text. What does seeing you call me L8R even mean?" See how decipher works for written things and spoken things equally well? That's what makes it such a valuable upgrade over the plain word understand. It tells your listener that real effort was involved. Now here's a mini dialogue. So you can hear decipher living inside a natural back and forth, and I want you to notice the rhythm as much as the words. Person A says, "Honestly, I love watching British panel shows, but half the jokes fly right past me." Person B replies, "Same here. Even with subtitles, I sometimes can't decipher the accents fast enough before the next joke lands." Person A continues, "Right! And by the time I've decoded one sentence, they've already moved on to 3 more. Person B laughs and says, "Exactly. It's like trying to decipher a code that keeps changing." Go ahead, pause for a second, and repeat that last line out loud, matching the rhythm as closely as you can. It's like trying to decipher a code that keeps changing. Nice work. That's genuinely one of the trickier words to fold naturally into a sentence, and you just did it. That's real progress, and we've barely started. Let's stay in that cafe scene a little longer, because there's a second word hiding right in your colleague's next sentence. She sits down, orders a flat white, and says, "Honestly, when I'm nervous or excited, my words get completely garbled. I start half a sentence and jump straight into the next one." Garbled. This is a fantastic word for describing speech or a message that has become distorted, confused, or unclear, often because it was said too quickly, transmitted badly, or mixed up somehow. Think about a phone call with a terrible signal where the person's voice keeps cutting in and out, and what you hear sounds broken and jumbled. That's garbled speech. The basic word underneath it is confused or unclear. But garbled specifically implies that something got scrambled in the process, like static interfering with a radio signal. Here's a natural example from everyday life. Imagine you're on a video call and the internet connection is unstable. You might say to your coworker, "Sorry, your last sentence came through completely garbled. Could you say that again?" Or think about announcements at a busy train station, where the loudspeaker crackles and you catch maybe half the words. You'd tell a friend, "I heard something about a platform change, but the announcement was so garbled, I couldn't catch which platform." And here's where it connects beautifully to fast native speech. When someone talks quickly and blends their words together, especially over background noise, what reaches your ear can genuinely sound garbled to an untrained listener, even though the native speaker made perfect sense to everyone else in the room. Let's slow this down for a second and talk about the sound itself, because this is exactly the kind of listening skill that most vocabulary videos skip completely. And it's going to make a real difference for you. When native speakers say a phrase like, "What did you say?" quickly and casually, in relaxed conversation, it often comes out sounding close to "what'd say." Listen to the difference. Slow, "What did you say?" Fast and connected, "What'd say?" The T sound softens, the D and Y blend into a soft J sound, and the whole phrase compresses into something that barely resembles the written words on a page. This is not the speaker being lazy or sloppy. This is simply how fluent, relaxed English naturally flows. And once your ear learns to expect this blending, sentences that used to sound garbled to you will start to resolve into clear, intelligible speech, almost like a photograph coming into focus, which brings us perfectly to our third word, intelligible. Something that is intelligible can be understood. It's clear enough to make sense to the listener. It's actually the opposite quality of garbled. So these two words work beautifully as a pair in your vocabulary. You might say, "Once I got used to her accent, everything she said became perfectly intelligible. I just needed a few minutes to adjust." Or, in a completely different context, a doctor might tell a patient recovering from surgery, "Your speech is becoming much more intelligible each day. Keep doing those exercises." Notice the upgrade here. Instead of the flat, overused phrase, "easy to understand," intelligible sounds precise, almost clinical in the best way. The kind of word that signals real fluency when you use it naturally in conversation. Let's do a quick role play together, because this is where these words actually become yours instead of just words you recognize on a page. I'm going to read the part of a language exchange partner named Marcus, and after his line, I want you to pause the video and answer out loud as yourself, using one of today's words if you can. Ready? Marcus says, "Hey, be honest with me. When I speak fast, is my English still intelligible, or do I need to slow down?" Now pause and answer him honestly, out loud, in your own words. Go ahead. Good. However, you answered. You just practiced real, spontaneous speech, which is honestly worth more than a dozen memorized sentences. Here's a sample response you could have given, just so you can compare. Honestly, most of it is intelligible, but every so often a phrase gets a bit garbled when you speed up, especially at the end of long sentences. Do you see how naturally garbled and intelligible sit together in one honest, useful sentence? That's the kind of fluency we're building today, word by word, moment by moment. Let's widen the lens a little now, because understanding individual words in a garbled or fast sentence is only half the battle. The other half is a skill I want to give you a name for. Grasping the gist. To grasp the gist of something means to understand the general meaning or the main point. Means even if you miss several individual details along the way. This is honestly one of the most liberating shifts a language learner can make, because it takes the pressure off catching every single word and puts the focus where it actually belongs, on the overall message. Picture a fast-moving business meeting where three people are talking over each other about a project timeline. Ma, you might not catch every clause, every number, every aside, but you can still say afterward, I grasped the gist of it. They're pushing the deadline back 2 weeks because of a supplier issue. That sentence right there is a small miracle of listening skill, and it's completely achievable, even at an intermediate level. Once you stop demanding perfection from yourself. There's a cousin word here too, one that pairs beautifully with grasping the gist, and that's the verb to glean. To glean information means to gather it gradually, often from small clues or scattered pieces, rather than receiving it all at once in a clear, organized way. Farmers used to glean leftover grain from fields after the main harvest, gathering up whatever bits remained. And the word carries that same feeling when we use it for information. You might say, I couldn't understand the whole news report, but I gleaned enough to know there was some kind of transport strike happening downtown. Or in a work context, from the tone of the email and a few key phrases, I gleaned that the client wasn't happy even before I read the full message twice. Let's build a longer conversation now. Because I promised you real, extended dialogue today, not just short exchanges, and this is exactly the kind of listening challenge that trips learners up the most, several people speaking naturally, one after another, with real rhythm. So picture this scene with me first. It's a Monday morning, a shared office kitchen. 3 coworkers are refilling their coffee before a big client call, and the conversation is quick, overlapping, a little chaotic, the kind of real English you'd actually encounter, not the clean, slow English of a textbook dialogue. Priya says, "Did you catch what Daniel said in the hallway just now?" Something about the client pushing the launch date. Tom replies, "Only bits of it. Honestly, he was talking so fast, I only gleaned that it's happening sooner, not later." Priya continues, "Right, that's what I got too, though the specifics were a bit garbled with all the hallway noise." Tom says, "Well, whatever the details are, I think we'll grasp the full picture. Once we're in the meeting room, it's easier to decipher what someone means when you can actually see their face in slides." Priya laughs and says, "Fair point. I always find spoken English so much more intelligible in person than over a crackly phone line." Tom nods and adds, "Same here, honestly. Half of fluent listening is just reducing the noise around the message." Now here's your role switch moment. And I mean it. Don't skip this part. This is one of the single most valuable habits you can build for real conversational confidence. I'm going to read Priya's next line, and then I want you to become Tom and answer completely on your own, out loud, before I give you the sample response. Priya says, "So what do you think? Should we ask Daniel to send a written summary instead, just to be safe?" Now pause the video and respond as Tom in your own words, using at least one of today's new expressions if you can work it in naturally. Take your time. Really say it out loud. Don't just think it in your head. Your mouth needs the practice just as much as your brain does. Okay, here's a sample answer for comparison. That's probably smart, honestly. Even if I grasp the gist in the moment, I'd rather glean the exact numbers from something written than rely on a fast conversation in a noisy hallway. Notice how effortlessly grasp the gist and gleans. Sit inside one natural, practical sentence about office life. That's not academic vocabulary anymore. That's lived in, usable English, and you just built it yourself. Let's pause here for just a moment. Take a small breath together. Close your eyes if you're somewhere safe to do that. Or just soften your gaze if you're on the move. You've already worked through 5 solid words in real context: decipher, garbled, intelligible, grasp the gist, and glean. And that alone puts you ahead of most learners who spend months collecting isolated flashcards that never connect to a single real sentence. There's no rush here. Fluency isn't a sprint. It's closer to a river, finding its path, slow, steady, always moving forward even when you can't see the progress day to day. Take one more slow breath, and when you're ready, let's keep going, because there's a lot more waiting for us. Let's talk now about 2 words that describe exactly what you're doing right now without realizing it. Catching on and picking up on. When you catch on to something, you begin to understand it, often after a period of confusion, like a switch finally flipping in your brain. "Ah," you might say, "it took me the first 10 minutes of the show to catch on to the main character's sarcastic sense of humor. But once I did, I couldn't stop laughing." Picking up on something is closely related but slightly different. It usually refers to noticing subtle signals, small clues, tone, body language, or hints rather than the main content itself. A friend might say, "I picked up on a bit of tension between them at dinner, even though neither of them said anything directly." Do you see the distinction? Catching on is about grasping the core meaning after some effort. Picking up on is about noticing the small subtle details underneath the surface. Let's practice a phonetic pattern here too, because this pairs perfectly with our theme today. When native speakers say, "What are you doing today?" in relaxed, quick conversation, the stress and rhythm often lands like this. "What are you doing today?" with clear emphasis on are and doing, while the surrounding words compress and soften. Listen to the difference again, slow first. "What are you doing today?" Now natural and quick. "Wadaya doing today?" Notice how "what are you" almost collapses into a single soft sound. This is exactly the kind of pattern that, once you catch on to it, once you start picking up on it in real conversations, becomes almost impossible to unhear, and suddenly fast English stops sounding like noise and starts sounding like music with a rhythm you recognize. You're doing genuinely excellent work so far, and we're only through the opening third of everything I have for you today. Yeah. Let's shift gears slightly now and move into a new cluster of vocabulary, one focused less on comprehension and more on something equally important: how you carry yourself, how you sound, how you feel internally when English starts moving fast around you and the pressure rises. Because here's the truth: nobody tells beginners enough understanding. Fast English is only half the challenge, staying composed. While you're still catching up is the other half, and that's exactly where we're heading next. Let's start with a word that captures exactly what confident, fluent speakers seem to have and what nervous learners often feel they're missing: composed. Someone who is composed stays calm, controlled, and steady, even under pressure, even when things are moving fast or going wrong around them. You might describe a colleague this way: she stayed completely composed through the entire client call, even when the video kept freezing, and they had to restart twice. The basic word underneath composed is simply calm, but composed carries a slightly more deliberate, almost visible quality. It suggests someone actively holding themselves together, choosing steadiness rather than just happening gent to feel relaxed. Picture this scene with me. You're in a job interview, and halfway through, the interviewer suddenly switches from slow, careful questions to rapid, natural conversational English, testing how you handle real speed. Your heart rate spikes a little, your palms get warm, but you take a breath and you answer anyway. Maybe a beat slower than usual, but clearly, steadily. Afterward, a friend asks how it went, and you say, "Honestly, when she sped up, I felt a jolt of panic inside, but I managed to stay outwardly composed and just asked her to repeat one part." That's the real skill we're building today. Not eliminating the nervousness, because nervousness is human and normal, but staying composed on the outside while you process on the inside. There's a related word here that deserves its own spotlight: unfazed. To be unfazed by something means it doesn't disturb, upset, or unsettle you, even in a situation where it reasonably could. You might say, the waiter rattled off the specials incredibly fast, but she seemed completely unfazed. She just smiled and asked him to slow down for a second. Notice the subtle difference from composed. Composed describes your outward behavior and control. Unfazed describes your inner emotional state, the fact that something simply didn't rattle you. Together, they paint a complete picture. Someone who is unfazed internally will naturally appear composed externally. Let's build a mini dialogue around this. Gownshead, set in a scene you can really picture. Imagine a busy airport gate. A flight has just been delayed, and the gate agent is making a rapid, slightly frustrated announcement over a crackling speaker system about rebooking options. Two travelers are standing nearby, one clearly stressed, one strangely calm. The first traveler says, "Did you catch any of that? She was talking so fast I only caught delayed and gate change." The second traveler, completely unfazed, replies, "Yeah, happens all the time on this route, honestly. Let's just wait for the screen to update. No point stressing over an announcement we can't fully decipher." The first traveler says, "I don't know how you're so composed right now. I'd be a mess if I missed my connection." The second traveler shrugs and says, "I used to panic too, but I've learned that staying calm actually helps me catch more information, not less. Panic makes everything sound more garbled than it really is." The first traveler nods slowly and says, "That's actually a really good point. I've never thought about it that way." The second traveler adds, "Once you're unfazed, your brain has more room to actually listen instead of just reacting." Now here's your role switch moment again, and I want you to really commit to this one, because composure under pressure is exactly the skill this dialogue is teaching. I'll read the gate agent's actual rapid announcement, and I want you to respond as the first traveler, out loud, processing it in real time the way you would in real life. Ready? The gate agent says quickly, "Folks, due to the delay, we're rebooking connecting passengers at the service desk. Please have your boarding pass ready." Now pause and respond out loud as the stressed traveler, asking a clarifying question, using the word decipher or garbled. If you can fit it in naturally, however you answered, that's real, functional English, the kind you'll actually need in an airport, not a textbook. Here's a sample response. "Sorry, could you repeat that? It was a bit garbled over the speaker. Did you say the service desk or the gate itself?" Simple, natural, and completely appropriate for the situation. Let's move to two more words in this same emotional family: falter and stammer. Because these describe the opposite of composure, and knowing them actually helps you recognize and forgive these moments in yourself with more kindness. To falter means to lose strength, confidence, or steadiness momentarily, to hesitate or waver. You might say, "My voice faltered a little when the interviewer asked a question. I wasn't expecting, but I recovered after a second. To stammer is more specific to speech. It means to speak with involuntary pauses, repeated sounds, or hesitation, often because of nervousness or surprise. He stammered through his introduction, clearly caught off guard by the size of the audience. Here's something important I want you to really absorb: faltering and stammering occasionally are not signs of weak English. They're signs of being human under real conversational pressure. And even native speakers falter and stammer regularly. They just rarely notice it in themselves, the way learners notice it in their second language. Let's slow down for a phonetics moment here, because there's a beautiful connected speech pattern hiding in casual English that relates directly to composure and hesitation. When a native speaker says, "I don't know, let me think," in a natural, hesitant way, it often compresses into something like, "I don't know, let me think," with "don't know" collapsing into "dunno" and "let me" collapsing into "lem." Listen slow first. "I don't know, let me think." Now natural and fast. "I don't know, let me think." This particular pattern is actually a gift for you as a listener, because these hesitation phrases, "I don't know, lem think, hang on, gim a sec," signal that even the native speaker is buying themselves time, processing, choosing their words. When you hear these phrases, you're not hearing confusion in the conversation. You're hearing a completely normal human pause, and recognizing that pattern instantly makes fast English feel less intimidating and more familiar. Which brings us naturally to intimidating and its close relative daunting, two words worth having ready for exactly these moments. Something intimidating makes you feel nervous, small, or afraid, often because it seems powerful, confident, or overwhelming in comparison to you. The way native speakers switch topics so quickly used to feel really intimidating to me. Daunting is closely related, but carries a slightly different flavor. It describes something that seems difficult or challenging in a way that makes you doubt your ability to handle it, often because of its size or scope, not necessarily because it feels threatening. Learning 50 new words in one sitting sounds daunting, but breaking it into small chunks makes it manageable. Notice how intimidating focuses more on an emotional, almost social pressure, while daunting focuses more on scale and difficulty. A fast-talking native speaker might feel intimidating in the moment, while an entire unfamiliar accent or a huge vocabulary list might feel daunting as a bigger challenge. Let's do a role play scenario here, a proper one set in a professional context, because this is exactly the kind of situation where these words earn their keep. Picture yourself in a team meeting, and your manager, a fast-talking native speaker from Chicago, has just asked you to summarize your project update on the spot. No warning. I'll play your manager, and I want you to respond as yourself, in your own real words, before I give you a sample. Your manager says quickly, "All right, quick temperature check. Where are we at with the client deliverables? Give me the headline first, then we'll dig into details if we need to." Now pause the video and respond out loud as yourself, giving a short, composed summary, even if you feel that instinct to falter. That's exactly the muscle we're training, responding under pressure rather than freezing under pressure. Here's a sample response for comparison. "Sure. Headline is, we're on track. Just one small delay with the design assets. I'll elaborate if that's helpful." Short, composed, unfazed, exactly the tone that lands well in fast-moving professional conversations. Let's introduce two more words now that describe the confident end of this spectrum: poised and self-assured. Someone who is poised carries themselves with graceful control, especially under pressure. There's almost a physical quality to this word, a steadiness in posture and voice together. Even when the microphone cut out mid-presentation, she stayed poised and simply raised her voice and kept going. Self-assured describes someone who has genuine confidence in their own abilities and judgment, without needing external validation. He answered every rapid-fire question with a self-assured calm that impressed the entire panel. These two words are wonderful goals to hold in mind, not because you need to feel poised and self-assured every single time English speeds up around you, but because naming these qualities helps your brain recognize and reward the moments when you do manage to embody them. Even briefly, let's weave in another phonetics segment here, because I promised you at least 4 or 5 spread throughout this video. And this one is particularly useful for professional settings. When someone says, "I want to make sure I understand you correctly," in a quick, natural, professional tone, it often compresses towards something like, "I want to make sure I understand you correctly," with "want to" softening into "wanna" and "understand you," blending the D and Y sounds into a soft J. Listen slow. "I want to make sure I understand you correctly." Now fast and natural. "I want to make sure I understand you correctly." This is an incredibly common pattern in business English specifically, so training your ear on it now will pay off enormously in real meetings, calls, and interviews down the line. Let's talk about tenacity and perseverance for a moment. Because building this whole skill set, understanding fast English and staying composed while you do it, is genuinely not a one-day achievement. It's a long game, and you deserve vocabulary that honors that. Tenacity is the quality of being determined, of holding firmly onto a goal or effort, even when things get difficult, refusing to give up. Her tenacity with English listening practice paid off. She went from missing half of every conversation to following along almost effortlessly within a year. To persevere means to continue trying to achieve something despite difficulty, obstacles, or slow progress. Even on days when nothing seemed to click, he persevered. watching one more video, repeating one more sentence. And steadfast describes a resolute, unwavering commitment to something, dependable and consistent over time. Her steadfast daily practice, just 15 minutes a day, mattered more than any single intensive weekend course ever could. Let's build one more extended dialogue here before we move into our next major cluster, because I want you to really absorb how these confidence and resilience words sound in a genuine, flowing conversation between two people who know each other well. Picture two friends, both English learners, catching up over video call, one of them living abroad now, immersed daily in fast native English, the other still studying from home. May says, "Honestly, when I first moved here, every conversation felt intimidating. People talk so fast, and I kept faltering, losing my train of thought completely." Jun replies, "I remember you telling me that, but listen to you now. You sound so much more composed on this call than you did 6 months ago." May laughs and says, "It didn't happen overnight. Believe me. There were days I wanted to just stop trying altogether. It felt so daunting." Jun asks, "So what changed? What actually helped?" May answers, "Honestly, just tenacity. I kept exposing myself to fast conversations, even when I felt unfazed by nothing." Ha! I mean the opposite. Everything fazed me at first. Jun laughs at the slip and says, "I got what you meant." "So you just persevered through the discomfort?" May says, "Exactly. And slowly my ear caught on. I started picking up on patterns, connected sounds, rhythm, and eventually things that used to sound completely garbled started to feel intelligible." Jun says, "That's honestly so encouraging to hear, because right now everything still feels overwhelming to me." May responds warmly, "It will click for you, too, I promise. Just stay steadfast. Don't judge your progress day by day. Judge it month by month." That conversation right there is genuinely everything this video is about, wrapped into 6 lines of real human dialogue. Now, here's your role switch, and I want this one to feel personal, because it is. I'll read Jun's honest, slightly vulnerable line, and I want you to respond as May, offering real encouragement, using at least 2 of today's words naturally. Jun says, "Do you ever think some people just aren't built for learning languages fast? Like maybe I'm just slower at this?" Now, pause and respond out loud as May, with genuine warmth and honesty. However you answered, I hope some part of you meant it for yourself too, because if you've made it this far into the video, actively pausing, actively speaking out loud, actively engaging, rather than passively watching, you already possess more tenacity than you're giving yourself credit for. Here's a sample response, just so you have something to compare against. Honestly, no, I don't think it's about speed at all. It's about persevering through the uncomfortable stage. Everyone faces it. Even native speakers learning a second language falter at first. It's just part of the process, not a reflection of your ability. You've now built a genuinely powerful set of words across two major clusters: comprehension words like decipher, garbled, intelligible, grasp the gist, and glean, and composure words like composed, unfazed, falter, stammer, intimidating, daunting, poised, self-assured, tenacity, persevere, and steadfast. That's 18 words already living inside real sentences, real scenes, real conversations you can actually picture yourself in. Take a breath with me again, a proper one this time. In through the nose, out slowly through the mouth. There's no rush. We still have a rich, practical section ahead of us: professional communication vocabulary, emotional nuance words, more listening and shadowing technique, and a full fluency round at the end to tie everything together. When you're ready, let's keep moving forward. Let's move into a new part of your vocabulary toolkit now. Now, one that becomes especially important the moment you step into a professional English environment. Meetings, interviews, presentations, client calls, the kind of settings where fast, confident communication isn't optional, it's expected. And I want to start this section with a word that ties everything together beautifully: articulate. Used as an adjective, articulate describes someone who expresses themselves clearly, fluently, and effectively, choosing words with precision and confidence. She's incredibly articulate under pressure. Even rapid-fire questions from journalists don't shake her ability to explain complex ideas simply. Used as a verb, to articulate something means to express it clearly in words, to put a thought or feeling into precise language. It took me a moment to articulate exactly why the proposal felt wrong. But once I found the words, everyone understood immediately. Here's the upgrade path. Instead of the plain phrase, say clearly, or the adjective clear, articulate signals a level of polish and intentional precision that immediately elevates how you sound in professional English. Let's picture a scene together. You're in a video interview for a role you genuinely want, and the interviewer, speaking quickly and casually, the way people often do when they're comfortable, asks you an unexpected question about a challenge you faced in a previous job. There's a beat of silence while you organize your thoughts, and then you answer clearly in full sentences, connecting your experience to the question directly. Afterward, imagine the interviewer telling a colleague, "That candidate was remarkably articulate. Even when I threw a curveball question at her, she didn't miss a beat." That's the exact effect we're building toward today. Not perfect grammar, not zero hesitation, but the ability to convey your thoughts clearly even when you're thinking on your feet. Which brings us to convey, a word doing a lot of quiet, elegant work in professional English. To convey something means to communicate or express an idea, feeling, or piece of information, often in a way that gets the essential meaning across effectively. Through just a few slides and a calm tone, she managed to convey the urgencies of the situation without ever raising her voice. Notice how convey often pairs with the idea of tone and manner. It's not just about saying words. It's about successfully transmitting meaning, feeling, or intention to another person. You might say, "I'm not sure I conveyed how much this project means to me in the email. Maybe I should follow up with a call." Let's add elaborate and clarify here. Two words that work as a natural pair in conversation, especially in fast-moving professional discussions. To elaborate. To elaborate means to add more detail or explanation to something you've already said. To expand on a point. Could you elaborate on that last point? I want to make sure I understand the timeline fully. To clarify means to make something clearer or easier to understand, often by removing confusion or ambiguity. Let me clarify what I meant. I wasn't suggesting we cancel the project, just delay the launch by 2 weeks. These 2 words are absolute gold for you as a learner because they give you a graceful, professional way to ask for more information, without ever sounding like you didn't understand, which is exactly the fear that keeps so many learners silent in meetings. Here's a phonetics segment worth pausing. 4, because this pattern shows up constantly in professional English. When someone says, "Could you clarify that for me?" quickly and casually, the phrase often compresses into something close to, "Could ya clarify that for me?" with you softening into a light ya sound after could. Listen slow first. "Could you clarify that for me?" Now fast and natural. "Could you clarify that for me?" This softened you sound after words like could, would, and did shows up everywhere in relaxed spoken English. Could ya, would ya, did ya? And once your ear catches this pattern, an enormous portion of casual fast English suddenly becomes far more intelligible. Let's build a proper role play now, set in a business meeting, because this is exactly where clarify and elaborate earn their keep. I'll play the role of a fast-talking project manager named Grace, rattling through updates the way people genuinely do when they're juggling 6 priorities at once. I want you to respond as a team member, asking for clarification naturally before I share a sample response. Grace says quickly, "Okay, so marketing's pushing the launch. Engineering says they can hit the original date if we cut 2 features, and finance wants a revised budget by Friday. Thoughts?" Now pause the video and respond out loud, asking her to clarify or elaborate on one specific point, the way you naturally would in a real meeting. However you responded, notice something important. You didn't need to understand every single word. Grace said to respond intelligently, you needed to grasp the gist and then ask a targeted, specific question. Here's a sample response for comparison. Could you clarify which 2 features engineering is talking about cutting? I want to make sure that doesn't affect the client demo. Simple, professional, and it buys you exactly the clarity you need without ever admitting confusion. Let's introduce Paraphrase Now, a genuinely powerful listening and speaking tool. To paraphrase means to restate something in different words, usually to check your own understanding or to explain someone else's idea more simply. Let me paraphrase to make sure I've got this right. You're saying, we should delay the launch, not cancel it entirely. This technique is honestly one of the single best tools any language learner can use in fast conversations. Because instead of asking someone to repeat themselves, which can feel awkward or embarrassing, you paraphrase what you think you heard, and the other person naturally confirms or corrects you. It transforms you from a passive listener struggling to keep up into an active participant, steering the conversation toward clarity. Let's talk about interject, digress, cut in, chime in, and pipe up together, because these 5 words all describe different ways people jump into fast, overlapping conversation, and recognizing them will help you follow group discussions far more easily. To interject means to say something suddenly, often interrupting, usually to add a quick point or reaction. She interjected with a quick correction before the meeting moved on to the next topic. To digress means to move away from the main topic temporarily, often into a related but separate idea. Sorry, I'm digressing. Let's get back to the budget discussion. To cut in means to interrupt someone while they're speaking, sometimes politely, sometimes abruptly. He cut in just as she was finishing her sentence, eager to add his own perspective. To chime in means to add your opinion or comment to an ongoing conversation, usually in a friendly, additive way rather than an interruptive one. A few other team members chimed in with similar concerns about the timeline. And to pipe up means to suddenly speak, especially after staying quiet, often somewhat unexpectedly or with a bit of boldness. The quietest person in the room finally piped up with the best idea of the entire meeting. Let's build an extended, lively dialogue around these 5 words, because this is exactly the kind of fast, overlapping, multi-person conversation that overwhelms learners the most. And I want you to hear it broken down and then hear it in full natural rhythm. Picture a brainstorming session, 5 people in a room, ideas flying, energy high. Sam says, okay, so my initial thought is we lean into the retro aesthetic for the campaign. Priya interjects immediately. Sorry to cut in, but didn't we try that exact angle last year and it underperformed? Sam replies, fair point. Let me clarify. I mean a modern twist on retro, not a direct repeat. Daniel chimes in. I actually love that direction. It could pair really well with the influencer strategy we discussed. Somebody digresses briefly. Tom says, random thought, completely off topic. Did anyone book the venue for the launch party yet? The group laughs, and Priya says, let's park that. Back to the campaign. Sam, keep going. Then, after staying quiet for most of the meeting, the newest team member finally pipes up and says, actually, What if we combined both ideas? Retro visuals, but framed through a completely futuristic story? The room goes quiet for a second, and Sam says, "Okay, that's actually brilliant. Why didn't any of us think of that?" Now here's your role switch moment. And this one is a little different, a little more challenging, because I want you to practice piping up, speaking after staying quiet, which is honestly one of the hardest social moments in a second language. I'll read the group's ongoing discussion, and I want you to jump in with your own idea, out loud, the way that new team member did. The group has been discussing 3 options for a campaign for almost a minute straight, and there's finally a small pause. A small pause. Now, pause the video and pipe up with your own idea or opinion about anything, practicing that exact feeling of breaking your own silence in a group conversation. That took genuine courage, even in a video exercise, and that same courage is exactly what transfers into real meetings and real conversations. Well done. Let's add 3 more essential words here: concise, eloquent, and rapport, because these describe qualities that consistently impress native speakers and colleagues alike, regardless of accent or fluency level. Someone who is concise communicates using few words, clearly and efficiently, without unnecessary padding. His update was refreshingly concise, 3 sentences, and everyone knew exactly where the project stood. Someone who is eloquent speaks fluently, persuasively, and with notable skill, often with a certain grace or beauty in their word choice. Her closing argument was eloquent enough that even the opposing side seemed momentarily convinced. And rapport describes a friendly, eager, harmonious connection or understanding between people. A sense of ease and mutual comfort in communication. Within 5 minutes of the interview, she'd built genuine rapport with the panel. And the whole tone of the conversation relaxed. Let's add candid, diplomatic, and tactful too, because these describe how you say things, which matters just as much as what you say, especially in fast professional exchanges. Someone who is candid is honest and direct, speaking their true thoughts openly, sometimes bluntly. I appreciate how candid she was about the budget concerns. No sugarcoating, just the facts. Someone who is diplomatic, handles sensitive situations, or people with tact, avoiding unnecessary conflict while still communicating honestly. Mao, he gave diplomatic feedback that acknowledged the good work, while still flagging the real issues. And tactful describes someone who is careful and sensitive when dealing with difficult topics or people, choosing words that avoid causing offense. She found a tactful way to point out the error without embarrassing anyone in the meeting. Let's do one more phonetics segment here, focused specifically on question intonation, because this genuinely changes how well you follow fast conversations involving lots of quick questions. In natural spoken English, yes or No questions typically rise in pitch at the end, while statement-like questions or requests sometimes stay relatively flat until the very final word. Listen to the difference in these two sentences. First, a rising, genuine question. Are you coming to the meeting? With the pitch climbing noticeably on meeting. Now, a flatter, more rhetorical or assumed question, common in fast professional speech. You're coming to the meeting, right? Where the pitch stays fairly level until a small lift on right at the very end. Training your ear to notice this pitch pattern helps you instantly recognize when someone expects a yes or no answer versus when they're simply confirming something they already assume, which dramatically speeds up your ability to respond appropriately in real time. Now, let's talk directly about shadowing, because I promised you a real detailed explanation of this technique, and it deserves proper attention, not just a passing mention. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say almost simultaneously, following just a beat or two behind, like an echo trailing closely behind the original sound, matching their rhythm, their stress, their intonation, and their speed as closely as possible, rather than just repeating the words in your own flat, careful voice afterward. The difference is significant. Simply repeating a sentence after someone pauses trains your vocabulary and pronunciation of individual words. Shadowing, done properly, trains your mouth and brain to move at native speed, to feel the rhythm physically, not just intellectually understand it. Here's exactly how to practice it. Choose a short clip, even 15 or 20 seconds, ideally something with reasonably clear audio. Play it once just to listen. Then play it again, and this time, start speaking along almost immediately after the speaker begins, staying just slightly behind them, like a shadow, following a person walking, always present, always trailing just behind, never fully catching up, but always moving in the exact same direction, at the exact same pace. Don't worry about understanding every word during this exercise. That's not the goal here. The goal is purely physical and rhythmic, training your mouth muscles and your ear's sense of timing simultaneously. Do this with the same short clip 3 or 4 times in a row, and you'll genuinely feel your mouth adjusting to sounds and speeds that felt impossible on your first attempt. Let's practice this together right now. Briefly, I'm going to say a short sentence at natural speed, and I want you to shadow me, starting just half a second behind, trying to match my rhythm as closely as you can, not just my words. Ready? Here's the sentence. I honestly think we should just wing it and see how it goes. Now play that back if you can, or simply repeat it immediately after me in your head at the same speed, trying to physically feel the rhythm. I honestly think we should just wing it and see how it goes. Good. That physical, rhythmic sensation, that's shadowing. And the more you practice it daily, even just 5 minutes, the faster your ear and mouth will sync with native speed. There's one more listening skill I want to give you today, and it might be the single most practically useful one of the entire video because it applies to literally every fast conversation you'll ever have, listening for the gist instead of every individual word and responding naturally even when you haven't caught everything. This means instead of freezing or panicking when you miss a word or a phrase, you lean on small, natural responses that keep the conversation flowing smoothly while your brain continues processing. Phrases like, I see, that makes sense, right, got it, and sure aren't just filler. They're active listening signals that native speakers use constantly themselves, and they buy you crucial processing time without ever revealing that you missed a detail. Picture this. A colleague is explaining a complicated technical issue quickly, using some vocabulary you don't fully recognize. Instead of freezing, you nod and say, I see, continuing to listen for the overall shape of the explanation. A moment later, they say something clearer. You respond, right? That makes sense. And by the time they finish, even though you missed some individual words in the middle, you've grasped the gist, the essential shape of what they explained. And you can respond appropriately. Maybe even ask a clarifying question about the one part that genuinely confused you, rather than the whole explanation. Let's practice this with a short listening exercise. I'm going to describe something moderately complex at a natural, slightly quick pace, and I want you to practice these gist listening responses out loud as I go, even inserting them at natural pauses, just like you would in a real conversation. Here we go. So basically what happened is the server crashed overnight because of a memory leak in the new update. And by the time the on-call engineer caught it around 4 a.m., about 20 minutes of user data hadn't synced properly. So we're running a recovery script now. And honestly, it should be fully resolved within the hour. But the team's going to do a full post-mortem tomorrow to figure out how it slipped through testing. However much of that you fully understood, notice that you can still respond naturally. I see. So it's basically fixed already. And that response alone keeps you fully, believably present in the conversation. Let's do one more thing before we move into our final vocabulary cluster, a self-practice exercise that I genuinely want you to build into your daily routine, not just today, going forward, because this is exactly the kind of habit that turns passive vocabulary into active, automatic language. Wherever you are right now, I want you to describe your surroundings out loud, using your senses, and try to weave in as many of today's words as feel natural, even if it feels a little strange at first. Here's an example to model it after, describing a quiet home office in the evening. There's a faint hum from the laptop beside me, and I can hear something garbled coming from the television in the next room. Probably the news, though I can't decipher a single word from here. The light outside is fading, and honestly, this whole day felt a little daunting when it started, but I feel, surprisingly, composed now, sitting here, going through this practice steadily, without rushing. Now it's your turn. Look around wherever you are and out loud describe what you see, what you hear, and how you feel, using at least 3 or 4 of today's words naturally. Take your full time with this. There's no rush at all. Let's move into our next cluster of words now. The vocabulary of emotional nuance, because so far we've talked about comprehension and composure and professional communication, but there's a whole layer of feeling underneath all of this that deserves its own precise language too. And I want to start with a word almost every English learner already senses deeply, but rarely has the exact term for overwhelmed. To feel overwhelmed means to be completely covered or defeated by something, to have more coming at you emotionally or practically than you feel able to handle at once. During my first week living abroad, I felt completely overwhelmed. Every conversation, every sign, every announcement felt like too much at once. This is such an honest, human word, and naming it precisely actually does something powerful. Psychologically, it takes a vague, formless anxiety and gives it shape. And once something has shape, you can start addressing it piece by piece instead of drowning in the whole of it at once. Closely related is exasperated, which describes a feeling of intense irritation or frustration, often after repeated attempts or repeated failures to achieve something. I was genuinely exasperated after asking someone to repeat themselves for the 3rd time in one conversation. Notice the difference from overwhelmed. Overwhelmed is about quantity, too much at once, while exasperated is about repetition and diminishing patience, the frustration that builds specifically from trying and failing multiple times. Add apprehensive here too, a word for the anxious anticipation you feel before something happens, a kind of nervous uncertainty about the future. I felt apprehensive walking into the meeting, unsure whether I'd be able to keep up with the pace of the discussion. And the beautiful counterpart to apprehensive is reassured, which describes the feeling of having your worries eased, of regaining confidence or comfort after feeling uncertain. Once my colleagues slowed down and rephrased things a couple of times, I felt genuinely reassured that I wasn't the problem. The pace just needed adjusting. Let's build a scene around these 4 words together because they form such a natural emotional arc. Apprehensive before, overwhelmed, or exasperated during, and hopefully reassured afterward. Picture a language exchange call, a video chat between you and a native speaking partner you've never met before. You open the call feeling apprehensive, unsure what to expect. And your partner, a friendly but very fast talker named Liam, launches straight into a rapid, enthusiastic introduction about his week. Within the first minute, you already feel a little overwhelmed, trying to catch names, places, and jokes all at once. You ask him to slow down once, politely, and he does, only to speed right back up 30 seconds later, and this time you feel genuinely exasperated, not at him exactly, just at the whole situation. But then something shifts. He notices your expression, pauses, and says warmly, "Hey, I'm talking way too fast, aren't I? Let's slow this right down, no rush at all." And immediately, you feel reassured, the tension in your shoulders actually easing. Now here's your role switch, and I want this one to feel emotionally honest. I'll read Liam's caring, slowed down question, and I want you to respond as yourself, honestly describing how you felt during that fast opening, using at least 2 of today's emotion words. Liam says gently, "Honestly, tell me the truth. Was I going way too fast just now? I want this to actually be useful for you, not stressful." Now pause the video and respond honestly, out loud, as yourself, however you answered. That honesty itself is a form of fluency, the ability to describe your own internal experience clearly in a second language is genuinely advanced. And you just did it. Here's a sample response for comparison. "Honestly, yes, I felt pretty overwhelmed at first and a little apprehensive about asking you to slow down, but I feel much more reassured now that we've found a better pace." Let's move toward the positive end of this emotional spectrum now, because struggling through fast English is only half the story. The other half is the genuine earned satisfaction of breaking through. And there are 4 words I want to give you for exactly that feeling: empowered, invigorated, gratifying, and exhilarating. To feel empowered means to feel a genuine sense of confidence, capability, and control, often after gaining a new skill, piece of knowledge, or successful experience. The first time I followed an entire fast conversation without asking anyone to repeat themselves, I felt genuinely empowered, like a switch had flipped. To feel invigorated means to feel energized, refreshed, and alive, often after an activity that initially felt demanding, but left you feeling stronger rather than drained. Strangely, after an intense hour of shadowing practice, I don't feel tired at all. I actually feel invigorated. Something gratifying brings a deep sense of satisfaction, particularly when it's the result of effort or hard work paying off. There's nothing quite as gratifying as finally understanding a joke in real time, in the actual moment it's told, instead of 5 minutes later. And something exhilarating produces intense excitement. Exhilaration, often mixed with a thrilling edge of nervous energy, similar to the feeling of a roller coaster or an adrenaline rush. Keeping up with a group conversation among 4 fast native speakers For the first time felt genuinely exhilarating, terrifying and thrilling at the same time. Let's do a mini dialogue here that captures this emotional turning point, the shift from struggle to breakthrough. Because I think this moment deserves to be honored in language, not just experienced silently. Picture two friends after a language exchange meetup, walking out of a cafe together. Aiko says, "Okay, I have to tell you something. That entire hour, I actually followed almost everything, no lag, no translating in my head first." Ben replies, "Wait, seriously? That's huge. How does that feel?" Aiko says, "Honestly, empowered. Like, genuinely empowered. I didn't expect it to feel this good." Ben laughs and says, "I remember. My own breakthrough moment. It felt exhilarating. Almost like my brain physically clicked into a different gear." Aiko nods and adds, "It's so gratifying, too. After months of feeling exhausted by every conversation, tonight I actually feel invigorated instead of drained." Ben says, "That's the real shift. Everyone talks about, but nobody can really describe until it happens to you. Let's use this moment for another sensory practice. Round. This time channeling positive emotional vocabulary instead of neutral description. I want you to think back to any moment, however small, in your own English learning journey, where something suddenly clicked, where you understood something fast or difficult without extra effort. Describe that moment out loud right now, using at least two of these four words: empowered, invigorated, gratifying, or exhilarating. Take your time, really connect with the memory if you can. Beautiful. Whatever you just described, hold on to that feeling, because that exact feeling is the destination. All of today's practice is quietly building toward. Let's return briefly to comprehension vocabulary now, because there are a few more precise, valuable words worth adding before we move into our final cluster. Let's talk about ambiguous, coherent, nuance, subtlety, and decode. Something ambiguous has more than one possible meaning or interpretation. It's unclear or open to confusion specifically because it could be understood in different ways. His answer was a bit ambiguous. I honestly couldn't tell if he meant yes or a polite no. Something coherent, by contrast, is logical, clear, and easy to follow. The ideas connect together smoothly and make sense as a whole. Even speaking quickly, she kept her explanation remarkably coherent, one idea flowing logically into the next. Nuance refers to a subtle difference or distinction in meaning, tone, or expression, something delicate that isn't immediately obvious. There's a real nuance between saying, "I'm fine," with a flat tone versus a warm one. The words are identical, but the meaning shifts completely. Subtlety is closely related, referring to the quality of being delicate, understated, or not immediately obvious, often requiring careful attention to notice. Understanding sarcasm requires picking up on subtlety, tone of voice, timing, facial expression, none of which appear in the words themselves. And to decode something means to work out its meaning, particularly when it involves interpreting signals, symbols, or unclear information closely related to decipher, but often used for slightly more systematic or structural interpretation. Once you learn to decode contractions and connected speech, an entire layer of English suddenly becomes accessible. Let's do a phonetic segment here. Our sixth one today, if you're counting, focused specifically on rising and falling intonation across a longer sentence, because this connects beautifully to nuance and subtlety. Listen to this sentence said two different ways with two completely different meanings purely through tone. First, said with a warm, sincere tone. "Oh, that's great." Now the exact same words, said with a flat, slightly rising, sarcastic tone. "Oh, that's great." Same words, opposite meaning, and the only difference is intonation, pacing, and tone. The subtlety we just talked about a moment ago. This is exactly why grasping the gist alone sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes you need to tune in to tone itself, not just words, to fully decode what someone actually means. That phrase, tune into, deserves its own spotlight, along with a small cluster of related expressions. Keep pace with, in sync with, blend in, trail off, mumble, enunciate, slur, zone out, tune out, and drown out. These 10 expressions describe, in very physical, concrete ways, exactly what happens during real listening, both the successes and the struggles. To tune into something means to become attentive to it, to focus your awareness specifically on it, often used for sounds, tone, or subtle signals. Once you tune into someone's rhythm, their individual speech pattern, everything they say becomes easier to follow. To keep pace with something means to match its speed, to stay level with it, rather than falling behind. It took weeks of daily listening practice before I could genuinely keep pace with native conversation speed. To be in sync with someone means to be aligned, coordinated, moving, or communicating together smoothly, like two dancers matching each other's rhythm perfectly. By the end of the trip, our conversations felt completely in sync, no more awkward pauses waiting for me to catch up. To blend in this listening context, refers to sounds or words merging together smoothly, becoming difficult to separate individually, which connects directly back to connected speech. In fast conversation, individual words blend in with each other so much that beginners often can't tell where one word ends and the next begins. To trail off means to gradually become quieter or fade away, often at the end of a sentence, as if the speaker's energy or thought simply dissolves. Her sentence trailed off at the end, and I genuinely couldn't tell if she'd finished her thought or just lost her train of thought. To mumble means to speak quietly and unclearly, often with the mouth barely moving, making words hard to distinguish. He tends to mumble when he's tired. And honestly, even native speakers sometimes ask him to repeat himself. The opposite of mumbling is enunciate, meaning to pronounce words clearly and distinctly, with each sound given proper attention. Teachers are usually trained to enunciate clearly, but real conversations rarely offer that same courtesy. To slur words means to pronounce them in a blurred, run-together way, often unintentionally, sometimes from tiredness, sometimes simply from natural, fast, relaxed speech patterns. By the end of a long, exhausting day, even I start to slur my own words a little, and English is my first language. And finally, 3 words for the actual failure points of listening, all worth naming, honestly, because naming a failure precisely is the first step toward fixing it. To zone out means to stop paying attention, to drift mentally away from what's happening around you, often without realizing it's happening. I completely zoned out for a few seconds during the meeting, and when I tuned back in, I'd missed the entire main point. To tune out is closely related, but often more intentional. Actively choosing, consciously or subconsciously, to stop listening to something, sometimes because it's overwhelming, boring, or simply too fast to follow. When the conversation got too fast to follow, I noticed myself starting to tune out entirely instead of pushing through. And to drown out means to make a sound impossible to hear clearly because something louder or more overwhelming is covering it. This applies to actual background noise, but also metaphorically to your own racing thoughts, overwhelming what someone is actually saying. The cafe noise completely drowned out the last part of her sentence, but also, just as often, my own nervous thoughts drowned out what she was actually saying. I was so busy panicking. I stopped actually listening. Let's build one final extended dialogue for this cluster, because I want you to hear all 10 of these expressions living together naturally in one flowing, realistic conversation. Picture a busy, slightly noisy restaurant, 2 coworkers catching up after a long week, background chatter, clinking glasses, the general hum of a lively room. Elena says, "Sorry, can you say that again?" The music in here is honestly drowning out half of what you're saying. Marco laughs and replies, "No worries. I probably mumble anyway when I'm this tired. Let me try to enunciate a bit more." Elena says, "Thanks, it's not you. I think I just zoned out for a second there too. Long week." Marco continues more slowly. "So basically, the client loved the pitch, but they want us to move faster on delivery." Elena responds, "Okay, that part I caught clearly. Keep going." Marco says, "The tricky part is keeping pace with their timeline without burning out the whole team." Elena nods and adds, "Right, we need everyone genuinely in sync, not just technically aware of the deadline." Marco's sentence trails off for a second as he takes a sip of water, then continues. "Exactly. And once we're all tuned in to the same priorities, it stops feeling chaotic." Elena smiles and says, "I think we're getting there, slowly. At least tonight, despite all this noise, I didn't tune out once." That conversation, noisy restaurant, tired coworkers, real interruptions, background sound genuinely drowning out parts of sentences, that is closer to real spoken English than almost any textbook dialogue you've ever studied. And you just followed all of it. Let's move into our final vocabulary cluster now. The language of growth and progress over time. Because everything we've built today, comprehension, composure, professional communication, emotional honesty, all of it depends on one final truth. Real fluency with fast English doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It arrives incrementally. And I want to give you precise words for that entire journey. Let's start with incremental and cumulative. Two words that describe exactly how skill actually builds, quietly, in small pieces over time. Something incremental happens in small, gradual stages or steps, rather than all at once in one big leap. My progress felt incremental at first, barely noticeable week to week, but it was still real progress. Cumulative describes something that increases or builds up gradually through successive additions, where small amounts combine into something much larger over time. The cumulative effect of just 10 minutes of daily shadowing practice after 6 months was honestly bigger than I expected. Notice how these two words work together beautifully. Incremental describes the individual steps. Cumulative describes the powerful total they eventually add up to. Let's add momentum, breakthrough, and plateau, 3 words that describe the emotional rhythm of any long learning journey. The ups, the sudden leaps, and, yes, the frustrating flat stretches too. Momentum refers to the force or energy gained by a process as it continues to move forward, the sense of things building speed naturally once they're already in motion. Once I started practicing daily, I built real momentum, and honestly, skipping a day started to feel wrong, almost uncomfortable. A breakthrough is a sudden, significant moment of progress or achievement, often after a period of difficulty or stagnation, the moment something clicks after feeling stuck. My breakthrough moment came during a random phone call when I realized halfway through that I'd stopped translating in my head entirely. And a plateau describes a period where progress seems to stop or level off, even though you're still putting in consistent effort, a frustrating but completely normal part of any long-term skill development. I hit a frustrating plateau around month 4, where nothing seemed to improve no matter how much I practiced, but I kept going anyway. I want to be honest with you about that last word, plateau, because it deserves real respect, not just a passing mention. Every single person who has ever become fluent in a language, in any skill worth having, has hit a plateau, a stretch where effort doesn't seem to translate into visible progress. This is not a sign that something is wrong with you or your method. It's simply how skill acquisition works, more like a staircase than a smooth incline. flat stretches followed by sudden steps upward, usually right when you're most tempted to give up. Let's finish this cluster with proficient, adept, versatile, meticulous, and relentless. 5 words describing the destination and the discipline required to reach it. Someone proficient has a high level of competence or skill in something, gained through training and practice, generally reliable and capable rather than merely beginner level. After a year of consistent practice, she became proficient enough to handle client calls without any preparation beforehand. Adept describes someone who is very skilled and competent at something specific, often implying a kind of natural ease alongside the skill. He's remarkably adept at picking up regional accents. He can shift his ear almost instantly. Versatile means able to adapt easily to different situations, functions, or challenges. Flexible and capable across a range of contexts. The best listeners are versatile, equally comfortable with a slow, careful speaker and a rapid, casual one. Meticulous describes someone who is extremely careful, precise, and thorough, paying close attention to every detail. Her meticulous daily practice log, tracking exactly which words tripped her up each day, made her progress far faster than casual, unstructured practice ever could. And relentless describes someone who is persistently determined, refusing to stop or give up, continuing with unwavering intensity despite obstacles. His relentless daily habit, 20 minutes without exception, rain or shine, tired or not, is honestly the real secret behind his fluency. Let's build one final extended dialogue here, because I want to close this vocabulary journey the way we opened it, with a real, warm, human conversation, this time set a full year after our very first scene in that sunlit cafe. Picture the same colleague from London, and picture yourself, a year later, meeting again. Except everything about the conversation has changed. She says, "Wait, hold on. Has something changed? You're following me so much more easily than you used to." You respond, and here's your final role switch moment of the entire video. I want you to genuinely answer her out loud, reflecting honestly on your own journey through everything we've covered today. She continues, "Seriously, a year ago I had to slow down completely for you, and now I'm barely adjusting my speed at all." Now pause the video and respond as yourself, describing your progress honestly, using as many of today's growth words as feel natural, incremental, cumulative, momentum, breakthrough, plateau, proficient, adept, versatile, meticulous, or relentless. However you answered, I hope you noticed something. That response itself, spoken clearly, spontaneously, under a small bit of pressure, is proof of exactly the progress you were just describing. Here's a sample response for comparison. Honestly, it felt incremental for the longest time, barely noticeable, and I hit a real plateau around the middle. where nothing seemed to change. But I stayed pretty relentless with daily practice, and the cumulative effect eventually led to this one breakthrough moment where things just started clicking. I wouldn't say I'm fully adept yet, but I'm definitely proficient enough now to actually enjoy conversations instead of surviving them. Let's do one more short, quiet moment together before we move into our final review. Because you've now worked through an enormous amount of vocabulary today, and your brain deserves a small pause to let it settle. So, wherever you are, let your shoulders drop a little. Let your breathing slow down for just a few seconds. There's nothing to catch up on right now, nothing to decode, nothing moving too fast. Just this quiet moment. You and everything you've built over the last little while. When you're ready, let's bring it all together. Now, let's do our fluency round. And I want you to really lean into this part, because this is where everything we've built today gets tested at speed, the exact skill this whole video has been training. I'm going to move through today's words quickly, one after another, in short, natural sentences. And I want you to simply listen. Let your brain recognize each one without pausing, without translating, just absorbing the rhythm and meaning in real time the way you would in an actual fast conversation. Here we go. His handwriting was so messy, I could barely decipher it. The phone line was garbled, but I still caught the main point. Once I adjusted to her accent, everything became intelligible. I couldn't catch every word, but I grasped the gist. From context alone, I managed to glean the whole story. It took me a minute to catch on to the joke. I picked up on some tension in the room immediately. She stayed remarkably composed under pressure. He seemed completely unfazed by the sudden change. My voice faltered slightly during the introduction. He stammered through his first sentence, then recovered. The pace felt intimidating at first. The whole task honestly seemed daunting. She remained poised even when the microphone failed. He answered every question with self-assured confidence. Her tenacity through the tough months paid off. He persevered even when nothing seemed to improve. Her steadfast daily habit made all the difference. He's remarkably articulate, even when speaking off the cuff. It took me a while to convey exactly what I meant. Could you elaborate a bit more on that point? Let me clarify what I actually meant. Let me paraphrase to check I understood you correctly. She interjected right as he was finishing his sentence. Sorry, I think I'm digressing a little. He cut in before she could finish her thought. A few others chimed in with similar ideas. The quietest person in the room finally piped up. His summary was refreshingly concise. Her closing remarks were genuinely eloquent. They built real rapport within minutes. I appreciated how candid she was about the issue. He gave surprisingly diplomatic feedback. She found a tactful way to raise the concern. I felt completely overwhelmed during my first week abroad. He got visibly exasperated after asking twice. I felt apprehensive walking into the interview. Her calm response left me feeling reassured. That small win left me feeling genuinely empowered. Somehow the practice left me feeling invigorated instead of tired. Understanding that joke in real time felt deeply gratifying. Keeping up with 4 fast speakers felt exhilarating. His answer was a little ambiguous. Even quickly, her explanation stayed coherent. There's real nuance in how that phrase can land. Sarcasm depends entirely on subtlety. It took practice to decode natural connected speech. Once you tune in to someone's rhythm, everything gets easier. It took weeks to keep pace with native speed. Eventually, our conversations felt completely in sync. In fast speech, individual words blend in with each other. Her sentence trailed off before she finished the thought. He tends to mumble when he's tired. Try to enunciate clearly when you're nervous. By the end of a long day, even natives slur their words. I completely zoned out for a few seconds. When it got too fast, I started to tune out. The background noise drowned out the last few words. Progress felt incremental at first. The cumulative effect surprised me. Months later, daily practice built real momentum. My breakthrough came out of nowhere, mid-conversation. I hit a frustrating plateau around month 4. She's genuinely proficient in fast conversational English now. He's remarkably adept at switching between accents. The best listeners are versatiles across different speeds and styles. Her meticulous tracking of mistakes sped up her progress. His relentless daily habit is the real secret. However much of that landed clearly for you. And I suspect far more landed than you expected. That right there is the entire vocabulary of today's video, compressed into just a few fast, flowing minutes, exactly the kind of speed and density you'll actually encounter in real native conversation. If even half of those sentences felt instantly clear, you are proficient with this vocabulary already, not memorizing it, using it. Before we close today, I want to give you one specific, concrete action, not a vague, keep practicing kind of instruction, but something measurable you can do in the next 5 minutes. In the comments below, I want you to write one full sentence, just one, using any single word from today's video. Decipher, garbled, composed, unfazed, articulate, overwhelmed, empowered, plateau, relentless. Any of them describing a real moment from your own life, your own experience with fast English, or honestly, fast anything. Not a definition, not a translation, a real sentence about your real experience. That single act, producing the word instead of just recognizing it, is scientifically one of the fastest ways to move a word from passive memory into active, usable vocabulary. And I read through these comments regularly, so I will genuinely see it. You've done something today that most learners never do. You sat through dense, fast, native speed English for an extended period, and instead of shutting down or tuning out, you paused, you spoke out loud, you engaged actively at every single turn. That, more than any single word we covered today, is the real skill this channel exists to build. Fast English doesn't have to feel like losing control. With the right vocabulary, the right listening habits, and steady, incremental practice, it becomes something else entirely. Something you can lean into, respond to, even enjoy. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today on Natural Word English. If this video genuinely helped you, the most useful thing you can do is that one small comment, one real sentence using one real word, and if you want more videos exactly like this one, vocabulary built directly into real, spoken, fast-paced context, make sure you're subscribed because we're doing this again very soon. Until next time, stay steadfast, stay relentless, and I'll see you in the next one.